welcome to the MP for Jesus. I am your host, Pastor Mike Matthews. This is episode 121. I can't believe we're at 121. I have a great guest with me today, Pastor Zack Blair. He is the author of a new book that we're going to be talking about, The Father Code. I love the book. It is a challenge to men to be present fathers, to be men of integrity, to be men who are there in their kids' lives. I really enjoy the book. Christian books that are geared towards men typically have a lot of guilt and shame in the book, and I was happy to see that the book near the end, especially when it comes to um, being examples to our kids in life, or when we get it wrong, humanizes us, and that we're not going to do this perfect. So welcome, Zack. uh
What's up? Thanks for having me, Pastor Mike. You are awesome, dude. I love what you're doing here, and I'm really grateful for your friendship and love our conversations together, man.
just wanted to I'll have the link when the episode come out. I'll have it in the show notes, but here's the book, The Father Code. So what what drove you to want to write this book? Because you have a lot of interesting stories in each chapter, and it follows. You got to read it from the beginning to the end, because it follows the life of two brothers, James and Mike, and what the dangerous outcome can be when a dad is not present in their life. So what led you to write this book?
So, two things. The first is learning how to be a father. I realized, early on, I had this pressure to be a perfect father, and I realized I could never be a perfect father, but I could be an intentionally connected father. And I wanted other men to get that realization prior to fatherhood, like entering into that fatherhood journey, or trying to discover it on your own. They might never discover it. That's a huge lesson. And with that, I remember holding my son for the first time, and just this immense amount of love was going out of my heart into him. Like, I just felt just this love. And I remember the feelings of inadequacy that I felt, and
Mm.
feeling like I'm gonna ruin his life. That was the first thing that came to my mind. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, at first I checked his fingers and toes. He had them. He had all the boy stuff that he needed to have. And then I was like, okay, now don't screw this up.
Mm.
But I felt overwhelmed by that. And then, I was in youth and young adult ministry for a very long time. Worked with college students, worked with teenagers, even worked with children through the years. And now I work with adults. And I've seen the difference between an intentionally connected father, the difference in the security of the child or now adult who had an intentionally connected father. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's everything. We're not going to be perfect fathers, but we can be intentionally connected fathers. And that's really the bedrock of the book.
Yeah, you talk about I might be getting the name wrong. I know you changed some details to protect
Yeah.
the innocent, but you talk about a story in youth group where a young girl was had a chemical imbalance condition, and but her relationship with her father kept her
Yeah.
from making a decision that might end her life.
Yeah.
So that really jumped out at me. Uh, could you talk about that? About how a father can
Yeah.
impact your life that way?
Yeah, what I try to do, and when I say we, I'm referring to my editor, Rachel Hills, who was so fun to work with. And she was a single mom, and it was really awesome to work with. I was scared to work with a single mom, but it was really great to get her perspective on this writing to make sure we didn't shame single mothers. I don't know how they
Yeah,
do it, Mike.
yeah,
And she really helped me to craft the message in a way that conveyed my heart. And so we provide 6 principles that I believe are timeless. First off, we jump into true relationships, and then we talk about we never leave, and then we're both there and present. So in this one, I believe that story falls under the principle we're both there and present. the
mm,
Her dad was just a great father. And I remember when she came into our office and she was just talking to my wife and she just looked as if she was trying to feel, obviously I can't project what her feelings were, but looked like she was trying to feel anything, but there was no indication. She was just such a good kid. No indication that she was inwardly troubled like she was. And she opened up and we had gotten her help and found out through the course of a lot of testing that she did have a chemical imbalance in her brain that needed to be medicated. She needed to go through counseling um, and she was a very high risk for suicide. But I asked her, I said, what was it that kept you alive? And she said it was my relationship with my father. And I became very close with her father and started to ask, like, hey, what did you do? Like what were the intentional connection points or intentional connections that you made? How did you do that? And I found out like he played practical jokes on her all the time. They both had such a great sense of humor. She played practical jokes on him. He would take her to breakfast early in the morning. On Saturdays, he had a couple of things that he did that man, he was just such a great father. He knew exactly what she needed, and he was there for her and loved her very, very well. And she said I could never do that to my father. Our relationship was just so strong. And it dawned on me, wow, like a relationship with a dad could be more powerful than a chemical imbalance. This is a
That's
powerful,
powerful.
it's
Yeah.
powerful, man, right?
Yeah, that's powerful. The one thing I love about the book, like I going into it, being a man that had to endure a divorce and now I'm remarried, you don't know what you're going to get from Christian books. But
Mhm.
this is a book. This is
Yeah.
a book that eh, men and dads can apply to whatever situation they're in because it's not. It doesn't portray fatherhood as perfect.
Yeah.
That there are stories in this book of imperfect dads, you know, figuring it out
Yes.
with
Yes.
God's grace.
Yeah.
That's
And those men want other men to know their story, and I had to change the detail because a lot of times they wanted to stay anonymous, but all the stories that I shared, I've talked with those men. They're like, tell men this, these are areas I messed up. And that's, I want to learn from other people's mistakes, not my own. We're going to learn from both. Mike, by the way, if I take a sip of coffee, don't say something funny again like you just did. Like you
okay.
don't know what
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna be very careful because you're hilarious, man. You never know when it's coming. Pastor comic over here.
Yeah. I years ago at lunch at my job, I was banned from telling jokes because I almost killed a coworker. She choked on her food because I told her joke. But but yeah, so my comedy has almost killed someone. So so yeah, but I really want people, men, to uh, get the realness of fatherhood that is portrayed in this book. Here at Limping for Jesus, I'm all about trying to help people trust God in difficult situations because we're all limping, right?
Yeah,
Physically, emotionally, relationally, and this book does a good job at giving you those 6 principles. But I really resonated with you have a line in there that says that our kids, that we were the dad meant for our kids,
yeah,
that God, you know, ordained us to be our kids' dad, and I that spoke volumes to me. Like my son is my mini me, and he
yeah,
has my humor, he has my sarcasm. Uh, being 13 years old and being a pastor kid, I'm not really digging the one liners back at me, but
yeah,
I remember here's this, like when I was reading the book, I remember when we were going to a church. One time I had to go to church. It was just me and him. His mom was out of town, and I remember someone cut me off and took a parking spot. And I don't know what I said, but my son goes, he was like 7, 8 at the time. He goes, "Oh, Pastor Mike." And I remember just saying, "Yeah, buddy, I blew it. I shouldn't have lost my." But that was just that kind of truth is in this book, especially the last chapter
Yeah.
of we need a model. We need to model this uh, uh, fatherhood and pour into our kids. And when we do blow it, we need to show them, hey, I didn't get it right.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've had such great conversations even last night with my boys, just hey, the things that I'm getting right, replicate it. The things that I'm getting wrong, you're going to figure it out one day. Please don't be
Mm-hmm.
bitter at me. I'm really sorry, but don't do it. Don't replicate it,
Yeah.
And I think, Mike, it's really important that just to note that, like our job as dads is we've got to walk in our own wholeness, right? Because we've all got these cracks in our heart based off of our childhood, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us just would yearn for a father just to say he was sorry or to say he was proud of me. Now my dad, after reading the book, he said, Zach, I realize I've never told you that I'm proud of you. That's how my dad talks. He's like, just like this. It's a good, So I do his voice. I was like bringing it down a little bit,
Yeah.
but I realized that was good. So he said, I realized I've never told you that I was proud of you. He said, just so you know, I am. And I said, oh, I know, Dad. I know, Dad. Because I didn't want, in the moment, I didn't want him to feel bad about never telling me that because I always knew he was. But even that moment for me as a 39-year-old man was like, it just hit me. I'm like, man, my dad's proud of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's so powerful. Like how the approval of a father, how much it plays into our development. And one thing that I encourage men is that it's not enough to know what you don't want to be. If you say, I'm not going to be the drunk dad, I'm not going to be the dad who screams, I'm not going to be the dad who's distant, I'm not going to be the dad who's, focused on himself. A lot of times, if we only have that, that's what we end up becoming. So
Mm-hmm.
not only do we have to know what we don't want to be, we have to actually say, what do we want to be? And it's instead of saying, I don't want to be the distant dad, I'm going to be an intentional father. I'm going to be an intentionally connected father. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day with each of my children, looking them in the eyes, playing with them. I'm not going to miss a sports game. And if I do, it's going to be one or two a season, something like that. You have to set these boundaries and this vision in your life, So the book is all about values, which I think these values should be universal. you
Mm-hmm.
know I
Yeah,
read
they
that
should.
I read recently C.S. Lewis, and I feel a little bit more empowered with the Abolition of Man. He was making a case that values are universal. There's values that are universal, I should say, and I really believe these are universal values for fathers. We're going to be, but back to that, I've apologized to my kids so much, and I found it only brings more influence.
Yeah, I noticed something like when a father didn't have that growing up, they
Yeah.
are more hopefully they are more intentional to want to give that to their children. I saw as I read this book, I saw parallels in my own life. I didn't have a biological father, and my grandfather raised me,
Mm,
and but that hole that was in my heart led to foolishness as a kid,
mhm,
going rogue, wanting attention, having the chip on my shoulder. You talk about the guy that was looking up in the baseball stadium for his dad, but his dad never came. Like I had that with
mm,
sports, soccer, football, but I know with my own son, like I just didn't want to wreck. I didn't want to do that wreckage in his life.
yeah.
Like I know we can't control, and you talk about like we can't control everything that our kids will end up doing, but we can influence them. And I know for me, not having a father, and this is portrayed in the book, we can, no matter what your background is, with Christ, you can do this, guys.
Yes. Yes. You know what's interesting about that? I did a study on resilience, not resilience IENCE, but resilience IENTS. And when a child has adverse circumstances when they're growing up, the kids who make it out of those circumstances and live a productive life, not getting incarcerated, and um, those kids often had somebody else come in and show them a better way.
Mm-hmm.
So even what I've noticed is, and I tell this to single moms a lot, even though dad might not be present, he's gone. God's faithful to bring a replacement. And that's why at the very beginning of the book, it took more than just my father to teach me manhood. It's really like, and I wrote this book because even men, this has got to be, when you said, I've got so many things going through my mind because you're so easy to talk to, Pastor Mike. When you said you don't know what you're going to get from Christian books, it's really interesting. You have like these stereotypes of what a Christian man should be, and not all men are wired the same. And so I do like marriage counseling, and I've had times where I'm counseling a couple and the woman has a higher libido than the man has. And I'm like, wait a second, really? Because that's not the way it works for me. But then you have to realize, like, okay, that's God's wired everybody differently. And so when you say all men are this way, all women are this way, and we have these stereotypes, then it makes the person who's not that way feel estranged. They feel different. They feel like there's something wrong with them, when really God's just wired them that way to begin with, like, okay, like I'm not
Yeah,
swinging.
when I first read Wild at Heart years ago, I was like, great, another Camping for Jesus book. Because you're not going to catch me. Men's ministry is like, let's get out in the woods. Let's get out in the woods, get around the campfire, and read the Bible. Bro, that's not me. I'm not wired that way.
Right.
I'd rather be at Starbucks with my coffee, with my Wi-Fi, and I'll hang out with Jesus there. But
Right.
but this book, your book, no matter what life stage you are at, and this is and I love this. These principles can apply to no matter how you're wired as a man who is trying to follow hard after Jesus. And that is what I appreciated with the book because, like you were saying a moment ago, I'm very skeptical at books that are focused on men,
Yeah.
especially in the church, because it's so many times what you were just saying. They only really focus on one type of guy, and they say, well, you got to be this, you got to be rugged, you got to be rough, you got to be tough, you got to know how to change your carburetor, bro. That's not me. I'm
Do cars
never
even
gonna
have
do.
carburetors anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I told a person this years ago. Uh, parenting with a disability. I said, there's some things I physically can't do, but I can shape my kid's heart. I can
Yes.
model character for him. I can
Right.
lead his heart. And that is what I took from the book was that is what you were getting at is we can lead our hearts.
Yes. Yes. And it also, even tying in, that thought to what we were talking about prior, there's a diversity of man out there. I have a really, really good friend. His name's Matt. And Matt, I thanked him one day. I said, hey, thanks so much for correcting my youngest son. He was at school. He was doing he was just acting a fool, man. Like, how our kids just get like crazy in their head. He's like throwing mulch. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? Like Lauren told me about it, but she said, Matt was there and Matt said, hey, knock it off. And so when I said thank you to Matt, he was like, I hope I wasn't too harsh on him. I was like, oh no, like I want him to be like you. So please, anytime, you're more than welcome to correct my son or be there for him. Like, honestly, man, like men, we don't know who to trust. We don't know who our strong relationships are. And I found, like, at the beginning of the book, like I found myself overwhelmingly just grateful for the men who have imparted to me. And they weren't always my my physical, my actual father. It was a spiritual father, Larry Betancourt, who taught me leadership. And, he has 4 daughters, and I've watched him, be very he loves going shopping, and, he's very intentional. He doesn't forget anybody's anniversary, and, culture would say, oh, those are girly traits. No, he's actually very intentional about his manhood. Like he's a wonderful man. And then my dad, he was an artist, like he wasn't very rough. He didn't like to wrestle or anything like that. But I look at aspects of my nature now that were molded by him and in his artistry. Like he was with cars and I'm with wood. And that's why I got a huge gash on my finger here, because I do carpentry and I smashed that thing.
Yeah.
My grandfather he was a strong man, World War II vet, and he was very direct. And he was a lot of fun. My uncle was a bodybuilder who led me to Christ, and he saw something in me and at a young age, and he really like nurtured my heart spiritually. And my father-in-law right now is just unbelievable. He's just a great decision maker and just another father to me. All those men were father figures in my life, and I just think the role of a man in a child's life is often underplayed in our culture and our society. But we are so needed.
Yeah, I mean, pop culture, like if you look at Disney movies, the dad's not there.
No.
Like the princess, the hero of the story, they all have a tragic backstory. The dad's not there. Or if you look at like Family Guy or The Simpsons, Peter or Homer, they're portrayed as a bumbling idiot. And,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm going to age myself, but I grew up on Married with Children and Al Bundy, and like they're like the dad. If dad is projected on culture, it's usually Hollywood playing down the part of dads. Like you don't need them, So and Christian men, the way Christian men are portrayed in media is even worse. That it's the classic, like they're
Ned Flanders.
Yeah, turtlenecks, pansies, pushovers, and that's not what we're called to be. We're called to be strong in character, and I really enjoyed reading the book because when your assistant got me the book. And I was like, man, I really hope this book doesn't suck.
Me too. I said the same thing whenever she got it for you.
I told my wife, I'm like, man, I'm going to interview Pastor Zack about his book in a couple of weeks. I really hope this doesn't suck because I can't lie.
Yeah, you and me both, man. I couldn't lie.
I'm transparent to a fault. So
yeah. Oh gosh, my face will tell the truth if my words don't.
Yeah.
Like you ever see somebody like they smile with the bottom half of their face, but their eyes are definitely not smiling? That's me.
Like I emote, so when I'm happy, sad.
Yep.
Same. I remember being in the pews and hearing crazy sermons, and my friends or my wife be like, "Shut up, Mike." Like they could just. but no,
I used to get in trouble. When I was a kid, I used to get in trouble because I would lean over to my mom in the pew and say, "Where's that in the Bible?" Because the pastor would say something like, "Where's that in the Bible?" It wasn't in the Bible what he was teaching, because we were involved in a church that didn't really teach out of the Bible at all. They said they did, but they didn't. They had a reading and then they kind of shared what they wanted. And I look at my mom like, "Where do you find that in the Bible?"
I once invited a missionary to my church that got out and taught that Jesus's first miracle was non-alcoholic wine, and I said to my congregation, I said, no one at a party ever celebrated when the dude showed up with their duels. No one got excited for non-alcoholic beer. So I
certainly nobody at a wedding, that's for sure.
I cannot when people preach like just dumb stuff. See, the Holy Spirit filtered me there. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. So I was thrilled reading this book that is practical, guys, for everyone. It really is.
Thanks.
Um,
I really
it,
wanted it to be easy to read and quick because most men that I talk to were like, "Show me the baby, don't tell me about the delivery." You know, most
yeah.
men, and it's I just want to get to the point. Working with editors and well, my editor, I meant to say working with publishers, they want them to be a certain amount of words and all of that, and I'm like, who's gonna have the time to read this, especially young men like who are
Mhm.
young in fatherhood? They're not gonna have the time to sit down and read a 900-page book on being an intentionally connected father. Just show me the baby, don't tell me about the delivery. So we
Mhm.
follow a story all the way through. We tell the story, we lay out the principle, and then we just share simple stories to make it memorable.
Yeah, and it's not boring either. Like the story is intertwined with the points, and I would encourage pastors to use this premarital counseling with dudes.
Absolutely.
Like I really enjoy like the quick read. You could read this on a plane trip. You could read it in one night. I know you designed it to read it with other guys. Like
Mhm.
there's small group questions at the end, um, but it is a book that is practical for the everyday guy. That's what I liked. I like
Yeah.
that.
Thanks.
Like maybe a guy that might not, that's not going to read systematic theology on on fatherhood or manhood will pick up a book like this. And it's not. I really enjoyed that it's not a Bible thumper book that is going to beat you up. Um,
Right.
I not one chapter did I feel, I was like, you can't go away from, you go away challenged and encouraged the way we're called to be, with each other as men.
Yeah.
We're called to make each other better. So many times, Christian literature outside scripture adds more to the weight that we're called to carry. So I appreciate that you didn't do that.
Oh, thanks, man.
So
Yeah,
thank
God's the ultimate father, and so there are amazing principles we can learn just through reading any chapter in the Bible as he, particularly the New Testament. And I feel particularly called to reveal to people that God's a good God who loves people, and that's what ultimately draws us to him is his love for us. And that sets us apart as fathers too. We have one chapter in there where we we lay out like, hey, our hands are gonna be used to show and express love, not produce pain,
you.
and I think about the hands of the father embracing the prodigal son, and he gets him his signet ring, and I don't know in the context of the story if he takes it off or if he tells the servants, how that is in the language, but that ring was probably on his hand, and then he's taking
Mhm.
off his robe and he's cloaking him, and he's putting a robe on him, like his hands are there, his hands embrace him and hug him, and that's, man, it's the love of God. What man doesn't want and have does what man doesn't have that hole in his heart to desire to be loved by his father and to know that God loves him.
Mhm.
We all have that in us.
I know my grandfather who raised me. I think I knew he loved me, but it wasn't until I was 21. I think I was 21. Yeah, I was 21, and he said to me for the first. It was the first time he ever hugged me, and it
Mhm.
was the first time he said, "Mike, with all your challenges, with your cerebral palsy, stuff like that, I just want you to know that I'm proud of you."
Yeah.
And when he that did amazing things for me. That made me believe I could face the world.
Right.
And when he passed away last year, his last words to me was, uh, "Mike, you're the best man that I know."
Oh, wow.
Uh, but those words can that's what we can do for our kids,
Yes.
and that is the impact that the father code is trying to call us to. Um, so in that regards, do you have any closing thoughts for men that will watch this episode?
Yeah, a couple of them. I would say, first off, thank you for having me, Pastor Mike, and thanks for sharing that. It's awesome to see how your relationship with your grandfather has really molded you, and that, I mean, you weren't alone. That's
Mm,
powerful, man, and that love is very real. And I'm glad you got to hear those words.
yeah,
I think about,
it changed my life.
yeah, yeah. Each generation must get better.
Mm,
And think about the World War II generation. They didn't even understand what PTSD was until
mm,
Vietnam. So you had men who came home. They say the World War II generation was the greatest generation. Well, the generation before that was the silent generation. They didn't talk much. They didn't say much. They had a belief in culture that you don't pick up a crying baby because you're going to create a
mm,
weak human. And so when a baby cried and cried and cried, there was no nurturing, there was no love shown and expressed. And so we know now chemically that certain chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, uh, cortisol is actually released. Dopamine, serotonin then stop producing whenever a child is not nurtured like that. And so we know the negative effects of that. The World War II generation takes it a step further. Now they had great marriages; their marriages lasted long historically, but they never really shared love, expressed love. But they could have easily had a culture pandemic of post traumatic stress disorder that was undiagnosed because of so many men coming home from the war. Then you have, going into the 70s and the 80s, you have men who are now, just raised by them, but they don't have a direction. And
mm,
those were our parents. Those were at my age, 30, 39. And uh, that was my dad. He didn't have a father, but he gave me one thing that his father never gave him, and he never left me. You know,
mm,
and that's what you're doing for your son, Pastor Mike. You're not, you're there. You're not leaving him. And instead of being bitter about, I just want to leave men with this, instead of being bitter about what the past in our relationship with our father is, we
mm.
must have a vision to know where we're heading and allow God to mold our hearts to get there, because
Amen.
every generation has to get better. That's the goal, right?
Mm. That's good. That I mean, I always said in behind the pulpit that through my son and me, God was breaking generations
Yeah.
of curses, and I don't want to get into theology of generational curses, but
You sure? Because we can go there. No, I'm
yeah,
just
I'm just
kidding.
saying, each generation models behaviors and actions and addictions and stuff like that. And I used to tell congregations that no matter what you come from, God can help you break those chains, and that's what God did through my father, through me and my son, because we're doing it different.
Yeah.
My son has a Christian dad. He has a dad that loves Jesus, loves him, and that is what we're called to be as Christian men, is be that influence.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for writing this book. I believe God's going to bless it. I know I was both encouraged and challenged by it, and like I said, I am a hard nut to crack when it comes to Christian books. That's like part of the reason why I don't want to write a book,
Yeah.
is because I don't want to be part of the noise
Yeah.
that can come from Christian subculture. But
Yeah.
I love how practical this book was, and I just want to thank you for putting this out, and I pray that men will be blessed by it.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Mike, and thanks for everything you're doing with Limping for Jesus. I can't wait to have you come in and impart to our staff. And I think that's in a few weeks. But I'm just excited.
September. Yeah, September
Yeah.
9th. Yeah.
I'm so excited. Thanks for all you're doing for just not only the Christian community, but those who resonate with, I mean, the multiple things that you've had to overcome in life. And just thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for keeping on with a strong vision. And I'm just praying for you and your ministry, man.
Oh, thanks, man. And to our audience, and until next time, I just want to encourage you to keep them for Jesus. God bless and see you later.